I never thought a day meant to celebrate my pregnancy would end in public humiliation. It was supposed to be a joyful occasion, my baby shower, the moment where I would share my excitement with family and friends, where I would feel loved and supported. But instead, my mother, the one person I thought would have my back no matter what, turned it into a nightmare I can never forget. It started off like any other shower. I was surrounded by people who were there to celebrate the life growing inside me, and I couldn't have been more grateful. The gifts were beautiful, the decorations were perfect, and I could feel the warmth of love filling the room. Everyone was so happy, laughing and chatting, and then my mother stood up. I thought she was going to make a speech, to say something sweet, something sentimental. After all, she was my mom, the woman who had raised me, the one who had always been there through thick and thin. But instead, what came out of her mouth was something that made my heart drop to the floor. "Scarlett's been acting a little too pampered lately," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter. "I mean, you've all seen it, right? She's barely lifting a finger. Honestly, I'm surprised she's even having a baby shower. She's been so spoiled her whole life, and now she thinks she's too good for the people who really made things happen for her." I felt the blood drain from my face as everyone in the room turned to look at me. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to love me, had just publicly shamed me, made me feel small, like I wasn't good enough to even enjoy a simple celebration of my child. I could feel the tears start to burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry in front of everyone, especially not in front of her. Instead, I stood up, trying to keep my composure. "Mom, that's enough," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You don't get to do this here, not today." But she didn't stop. She just smiled, like she had won something. "Oh, Scarlett, you know I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking," she replied, her tone condescending. "You've always been the golden child, haven't you? Everyone's always been so proud of you. But it's time you realize that the world doesn't revolve around you." I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me, some uncomfortable, others unsure of what to do. It felt like the walls were closing in. I tried to smile, but it felt like a mask slipping off my face. My own mother had just destroyed me in front of all the people who meant the most to me. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, and now it was ruined, tainted by her words. The worst part? She wasn't even sorry. She didn't care that she had humiliated me. She didn't care that this day was supposed to be about celebrating a new life, not tearing me down. As I looked at the faces of the people in the room, I realized something. This wasn't just a mistake. My mom had always treated me like this, always found ways to make me feel inferior. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I stood there for a moment, feeling my body tense, my mind racing. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her have the last word. "I'm done," I said, my voice growing stronger, though my hands were shaking. "You've crossed a line, Mom, and I won't let you do this to me anymore. You don't get to ruin this day or any other day. You want to humiliate me? You want to make me feel small? Well, I have something for you." And that was when I decided it was time to give her a taste of her own medicine. The room was silent. It felt like time had stopped. I could hear my own breath, shallow and steady, as I tried to gather my thoughts. I wasn't about to let my mother walk all over me anymore. She had done it for years, constantly belittling me, undermining my achievements, making me feel like nothing was ever good enough. But today, in front of all these people, was going to be the last time. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down, knowing I had to think clearly. I looked at the guests who were all still staring, unsure of what to do. The awkwardness was palpable, and I felt a flicker of guilt for the tension I had just created. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't about the guests. This wasn't even about my mother anymore. This was about me standing up for myself, for the woman I had become, and no one, not even her, could take that away from me. "Do you really think you can embarrass me and just walk away, Mom?" I asked, my voice now clear, though it held an edge. "I'm not that girl anymore." Her face softened for just a split second, a brief moment of realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the little girl she could control anymore. But then she quickly masked it with a scoff. "Oh, please. What's this act, Scarlett? You think you can stand up to me now? You think I care about your drama?" I could feel my fists clenching at my sides. I had to hold it together. This wasn't about arguing with her. This was about making her understand what it felt like to be humiliated. "You've always made me feel small, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I've let it happen because for some reason I thought you'd change. But I'm done. This is my day, and I'm not going to let you ruin it." I turned to face the crowd who were still sitting in stunned silence. "I know you all heard what my mother just said. It's not the first time she's done this, but I'm not here to be a punching bag anymore." I could see some guests shift uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged uncertain glances. But no one spoke up. No one tried to stop me. Maybe they were afraid of the confrontation, or maybe they didn't know the full history between my mother and me. Either way, I was going to make sure they understood my side of the story. "My mom has always been the type to put me down in front of others, to make me feel like I'm never enough," I continued. "It doesn't matter how hard I work, how much I achieve. Nothing is ever good enough for her. She's always been the one in control, dictating how I should live my life, who I should be. And for a long time, I let her." The room was dead quiet, and my mother's face flushed with anger. She was probably regretting opening her mouth, but I wasn't about to stop now. "But I've grown, and I've learned," I said, looking directly at her. "I've learned that I don't need her approval to be happy. I don't need her to define who I am. And most importantly, I don't need to let her humiliate me anymore." A few gasps went through the room as they realized what I was saying. This wasn't just a simple family disagreement. It was a public declaration of independence. I wasn't the same person I used to be. I wasn't the little girl looking for her mother's love. I was a woman, and I had a family to protect now. My mother stood up, clearly furious, her face red with embarrassment and anger. "You ungrateful little—" I cut her off before she could finish her sentence. "You've spent my entire life making me feel like I'm not good enough. But not anymore, Mom. Not today. This isn't just my baby shower. It's the moment I take control of my own life." I walked over to the table where all the baby gifts were neatly stacked. I picked up a gift bag, one of the ones I'd received from a friend, and walked over to my mother. I could see her eyes narrowing in confusion. She had no idea what I was doing, and for the first time, that gave me the upper hand. "I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval," I said, holding the bag out to her. "But now it's time you earned mine. I've put up with your insults, your put-downs, your controlling behavior, but not anymore. I'm done pretending." Her eyes flicked to the bag I was holding, still unsure of what I was doing. "What's that supposed to be?" she sneered, not knowing what to expect. But I could feel my pulse quicken. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I handed her the gift bag, but as she took it, I quickly pulled out a small envelope from inside the bag. It was the letter I'd received a week earlier from her bank, an alert about her credit card bills that I had taken the liberty of reviewing. I had the receipts, the details, everything. She had been using her money to make a lavish lifestyle for herself, while constantly putting me down about what I could and couldn't afford. The hypocrisy was maddening. "Before you start throwing stones," I said, handing her the envelope, "maybe you should read this. It's time you face the truth." Her face froze as she read the contents of the letter. The color drained from her face as she looked up at me, realizing what I had done. She had always prided herself on keeping control, on making sure I stayed in my place. But now the tables were turned, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. The room was filled with tension. Guests looked between us, unsure of how to react, but I knew I had just done something that would change everything. I had taken control of my life, and I had exposed her for the person she truly was. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady now. "This is my life. This is my family. And from now on, I make the rules." I could see my mother's face contort with rage as she stormed out of the room. But it didn't matter. The damage was done, and for once it was me who held the power. The tension in the room was almost suffocating after my mother stormed out. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. It felt like the air was thick with disbelief, with people unsure of what had just unfolded. I could hear the muffled sounds of her angry footsteps retreating down the hall, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of regret. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I had done something for me. I had stood up for myself, and no matter what happened next, I wasn't going to let anyone push me around. Slowly, I turned to face the guests, who were still frozen in shock. I could feel their eyes on me, some filled with sympathy, others with confusion. But I didn't care about what they thought anymore. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let it be tainted by the tension that had just erupted. I cleared my throat and forced a smile, trying to break the ice. "I'm sorry about that, everyone. It's just, well, family drama, I guess," I said, trying to lighten the mood. A few people chuckled nervously, but the atmosphere was still heavy. "Let's get back to celebrating, shall we?" I added, trying to take control of the situation, even if my insides were still rattling from what had just happened. The room didn't feel the same anymore, but I wasn't about to let my mother's cruelty ruin this day completely. I had a baby to celebrate, and I wasn't going to let anything overshadow that. The rest of the shower continued in a much quieter way. The guests awkwardly returned to their conversations, trying to act like everything was normal, but I knew it wasn't. My mind kept replaying the confrontation, and I kept asking myself, was it enough? Did I really give her a taste of her own medicine, or was there more to do? I went through the motions, smiling at gifts, chatting with friends, and pretending like I hadn't just had a public breakdown with my own mother. I could see people stealing glances at me, but no one dared to bring up what had just happened. It wasn't like I wanted to relive it, but it felt like everything had shifted in that room, and I wasn't sure how to move forward. It was like the curtain had been pulled back, and everyone could see the real me, the woman who was no longer afraid to stand up for herself. But as much as I tried to act like everything was fine, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was unfinished business. It wasn't just about the moment with my mother anymore. It was about how I had let her manipulate me for so long. How had I let her control my life, my happiness? It wasn't just about the baby shower. It was about years of living under her thumb, always feeling like I wasn't enough, always striving for her approval. Then, an hour later, when the last of the guests had finally left, I stood by the window and stared out at the world beyond, reflecting on everything that had happened. I could still feel the sting of what my mother had said, but it was different now. It wasn't as sharp. It wasn't as crippling. The confrontation had felt terrifying at first, but now that it was over, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. It was then that I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, and a sick feeling of dread crept over me. I knew it was her, my mother. I wasn't ready to face her yet, not after everything that had just happened. But part of me knew she wouldn't let it go. She never did. I opened the door cautiously, and there she was, standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Scarlett," she said, her voice tight, "you think you can just embarrass me like that and walk away?" I crossed my arms over my chest, standing tall. "I didn't embarrass you, Mom. You did that all on your own. You humiliated me in front of everyone, and I won't stand for it anymore." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the flicker of guilt behind her anger, but it was quickly replaced by her usual defensiveness. "You don't get to talk to me like that. You have no idea what I've done for you, for your whole life. I raised you, and this is how you repay me?" I shook my head, fighting back the emotions that were threatening to rise to the surface. "I don't owe you an apology, Mom. You owe me one. You've spent my entire life making me feel small, but I'm done letting you control me." For a moment, there was silence between us. The words hung in the air, unspoken and heavy. My mother looked at me, and I could tell she was trying to figure out how to fix this, how to get back to her old ways of manipulating me. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. "You may have raised me, but that doesn't mean you get to walk all over me," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm not that scared little girl anymore, and I'm not going to pretend I am. You've hurt me for too long, and today I finally stood up for myself. If you can't respect that, then maybe it's time we take a step back." The silence was deafening. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again. She was defeated. For the first time in years, she didn't have the power to manipulate me. "I hope you can understand, Mom," I said quietly. "This is about me finding my own voice. You don't get to control my happiness anymore." Without another word, I closed the door gently, leaving her standing outside. I had done it. I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially my mother, take that away from me. After I closed the door, I stood there for a moment, taking in what had just happened. I had never imagined that standing up for myself would feel so liberating, yet so exhausting at the same time. My whole life had been shaped by my mother's harsh words, her criticisms, her constant comparisons, and her attempts to make me feel inferior. But today, for the first time, I had taken control. I had chosen me over her, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. But there was still a sense of unease that lingered in my chest. I wasn't naive enough to believe that everything between us was going to change overnight. My mother's words still haunted me, and I knew deep down she wasn't going to just let me go that easily. She was too used to having power over me. But I had made the first step, and that meant something. It meant that I was finally learning how to protect myself, how to stand firm in who I was, and how to break free from the emotional shackles that had bound me for years. The following days were difficult. I kept replaying everything in my head, questioning whether I had done the right thing, wondering if I had gone too far. But the truth was, I didn't regret what had happened. The humiliation, the confrontation, the anger, it all felt like a cleansing. It wasn't easy, but I knew I couldn't let my mother control me any longer. I couldn't allow her to dictate who I was or how I should feel, especially when it came to something as important as my pregnancy, my future, and the happiness of my own growing family. The tension between my mother and me didn't dissipate quickly. She called several times after our confrontation, but I ignored each call. I couldn't face her, not yet. I needed time to process everything, to digest what had happened, and to figure out how I was going to move forward. I spent most of my time alone, thinking, reflecting on how far I had come. I had surrounded myself with a small circle of friends who had always been there for me, offering their support and reminding me of my worth. They had watched my mother's treatment of me for years, but I had always made excuses for her, always brushed off the hurt she caused. But now, with the baby on the way, things felt different. I couldn't let my child grow up in an environment where emotional abuse and manipulation were the norms. I had to protect my own happiness and well-being before anyone else's. A few days later, I finally picked up the phone when I saw my mom's name on the screen. The familiar dread crept over me, but I knew it was time to face her. I wasn't going to run away from this. It was time for us to have the conversation that had been a long time coming. "Hello," I said, my voice steady. "Scarlett." My mother's voice sounded smaller, almost defeated. It was a tone I hadn't heard from her in years. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath. "I think we do." There was silence on the other end of the line before she spoke again. "I'm sorry for what I said at your baby shower. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know what came over me." I paused, trying to process her apology. It was the first time in a long time that she had admitted fault, and I wasn't sure how to respond. Was this genuine? Or was it just another manipulation tactic trying to get me to back down? "I appreciate the apology," I said slowly. "But the thing is, Mom, I've been hurt by you for a long time. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to your expectations, trying to earn your love and approval. And no matter what I did, it was never good enough. That's not okay anymore. I'm not going to let you make me feel small anymore." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear her breathing, like she was trying to find the right words to say. "I never meant to hurt you," she finally said, her voice quivering. "I thought I was just helping. I thought I was just trying to teach you the right way to live." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. It wasn't just about her helping. It was about control. It was about her need to always be right, to always have the final say. She never once considered how it made me feel. "You've hurt me more than you know," I said quietly. "And for a long time, I thought I had to accept it, that it was just part of being your daughter. But I'm not that girl anymore. I'm a mother now, and I have to protect myself and my family. I can't keep letting you walk all over me." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line, but I didn't soften my stance. "Mom, I love you. I do. But this has to stop. You can't keep treating me this way." And if you really want a relationship with me, things have to change. I'm not going to let my child grow up in the middle of this anymore." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "I don't know if I can change, Scarlett. I don't know if I can be the mother you need me to be. I'm not asking you to change overnight," I said, my voice softening just a little. "But I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. We need to have a healthy relationship for both of our sakes. But I won't let you hurt me anymore." After a long pause, she sighed deeply. "Okay, I'll try, Scarlett. I'll try to be better." I didn't know if I believed her. I didn't know if she would actually change, but I was finally ready to put boundaries in place. I wasn't going to let her treat me like this anymore, no matter what. And for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of the burden lift. Maybe the road to healing wouldn't be easy, and maybe it would take time. But I had finally taken control of my own happiness, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not my mother, take that away from me. The weeks that followed were a mix of awkward attempts at reconciliation and quiet reflection. After the phone call with my mother, I spent a lot of time thinking about what had happened, how I had felt, and what it meant for my future. For so long, I had been afraid to confront my mother, afraid to stand up for myself because of how I was conditioned to believe that she always knew what was best for me. But now, I realized that standing up for myself wasn't just about protecting my own peace. It was about setting an example for my child, the child I was bringing into the world. I needed to show them that boundaries matter, that it's okay to say no, and that you don't have to accept emotional abuse just because it comes from family. That's what I held on to through the following weeks, when my mom reached out sporadically, attempting to reconnect, but still not fully understanding the depth of what had happened. She would send texts apologizing, calling me to check in. But there was always this underlying tension, this lack of understanding of why I had reacted the way I did. It was as if she couldn't quite grasp that I wasn't the same person anymore. She still wanted to treat me like the little girl who would cower in her presence and apologize for existing. But I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't respond to her right away. I needed space, space to breathe, to recover from the emotional toll the whole ordeal had taken on me. And every time I thought about giving in, about reaching out to her first, I reminded myself of why I had done what I did in the first place. I had to protect my peace. I had to create a life where I wasn't constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that at any moment, someone, anyone, could tear me down with a few harsh words. And that someone had been my mother. A few weeks later, I decided to reach out to her, not because I owed her an explanation, but because I wanted to, for the sake of my own peace of mind. My mother had always been someone who needed control, but I was no longer willing to give her that. So I reached out, but this time I set the tone. "I think we need to talk," I texted her. "But I need you to hear me, Mom. I don't want to fight. I just need you to understand where I'm coming from." Her response came a few minutes later. "Of course. I know I hurt you, and I want to make things right." When I saw that message, something shifted. For the first time, I felt like there was a chance for understanding, genuine understanding. Maybe it wasn't going to be perfect, but maybe it could be something real. I wasn't going to expect miracles, but for the first time, I was allowing myself to be open to the possibility that things could improve, even if it took time. We met a few days later at a small cafe, and I could tell that she had been thinking about everything. The awkwardness between us was still there, but it was different this time. It wasn't the kind of coldness that I had always felt from her when she was angry or dismissive. It was more like a tentative attempt at bridging the gap between us. She sat across from me, eyes tired but hopeful. And for a moment, I felt something that I hadn't in years: vulnerability. My mother was vulnerable, and for once, it wasn't because of something she had done to me. It was because she was admitting she had hurt me, and that wasn't something she was used to. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I've spent so many years trying to control everything, trying to make sure you turned out the way I wanted, and I see now that I've only made things worse." I wasn't sure if I could believe her. Could this apology be real? Could my mother actually change? I didn't know, and maybe it didn't even matter. What mattered was that I was finally listening to myself, and I was finally letting myself decide what I needed from her and from our relationship. "I don't know how you can make things right," I replied softly, "but I'm willing to listen, to hear what you have to say. I just can't go back to the way things were." She nodded, her eyes brimming with emotion. "I understand that. I think I've been scared, Scarlett. Scared that I would lose control over you. Scared that you would stop needing me, and I acted out of that fear. But that's not an excuse for the way I treated you. You've always been your own person, and I should have respected that." I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me shift. The old me would have cried at that moment, would have let her apologize and accepted it, no questions asked. But now I just felt calm. I wasn't waiting for her to fix things for me. I wasn't asking for validation. I had already given myself that. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, looking at her directly. "But I can't let you control me anymore. I can't keep making excuses for your behavior. I need to set boundaries now, Mom, and that means being honest with you, even when it's hard." She was silent for a moment, but I could tell she was thinking. She was processing. I knew it wasn't going to be easy for her to change, but this conversation felt like the first step toward something new. Not perfect, but real. "I want to do better," she finally said. "I want to be a better mother to you, a better grandmother to my grandchild. And I'm willing to work at it, if you'll let me." And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me, for my own peace, for my own strength, and for the future I was building for my child. And for the first time, I felt like I was free. The weeks following our conversation marked a period of cautious rebuilding between my mother and me. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, moments when she would try to fall back into old patterns, trying to exert control, to make comments that would have once made me second-guess myself. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. Every time she crossed a boundary, I called it out. I stood up for myself in ways I never had before. I wasn't doing it for her approval anymore. I was doing it for me and my baby. I focused on the future, not the past. I had to, for my own mental health and for the well-being of my growing family. I knew that if I let myself dwell on the hurt, the years of emotional manipulation, I wouldn't be able to move forward. I had learned the hard way that living in the shadow of the past only prevented me from seeing the potential of my future. And the future I was building was one where I wasn't afraid to speak my truth, to set boundaries, and to protect the people I loved. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after our meeting, my mother invited me over for tea. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was ready to engage in another conversation that might trigger old wounds. But something inside me told me I needed to go. I needed to see if this shift in our relationship was real, if it was sustainable. I couldn't keep running from the discomfort forever. I was stronger now, and I was ready. When I arrived at her house, the familiar smell of jasmine tea and freshly baked cookies hit me. It was a reminder of the childhood comfort I once had in this home, but now it felt different. The air was thick with something new, an effort, an attempt at change. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands clasped around a cup of tea. She looked up as I entered, her face soft, her expression more vulnerable than I had ever seen. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe a lecture, maybe more control. But what I got was something I never thought I'd hear from her. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice calm but unsure, "about everything you said last time, about the boundaries you set. I've been thinking about how I treated you, and I realize now how wrong I was." I sat down at the table, unsure how to respond. Her words were a mix of surprising and relieving. I didn't know how to take them. Was this the same woman who had spent so many years undermining me, belittling me at every turn? Was this a genuine attempt to change? Or was it just another way to manipulate me? I didn't know, but I wasn't going to jump to conclusions. I had to listen. I had to give her the chance to prove herself, even if it took time. "I know I've hurt you," she continued. "I've been so caught up in trying to control everything and trying to make sure you didn't make the mistakes I made that I lost sight of what was important, your happiness. I didn't see it before, but I see it now, and I'm sorry, truly sorry." Her words were a far cry from the sarcastic jabs, the condescending tone, and the cold detachment I had been used to. She wasn't trying to guilt trip me into feeling sorry for her. She wasn't playing the victim. She was just apologizing. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "I've never heard you say that before," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I've never heard you admit that you were wrong, but this means something to me. It means that maybe, just maybe, we can move forward." She nodded, her eyes moist with unshed tears. "I hope so, Scarlett. I really do." I could feel the walls between us starting to crack. The tension was still there, still lingering like an unspoken question. But the weight that had hung over our relationship for years was starting to lift. It was a relief, though tempered with caution. I knew that old habits die hard, and I wasn't about to let my guard down completely. But I was willing to give her a chance because this time I had something to protect. My own peace, my child, and the future I was building. "I'm not saying everything is going to be perfect," I said, breaking the silence. "I'm not even sure where this is going or if it's even going to work, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give us the chance to rebuild, as long as it's healthy and respectful. I need to know that I'm not going to be controlled, that I'm not going to be belittled anymore. And that's something I need from you if we're going to have a relationship." My mother's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. She just listened. And for once, I didn't feel like I was speaking to a wall. I wasn't speaking to someone who was just waiting for their turn to talk, to control the conversation. She was listening, and that, for me, was a huge step forward. "I understand," she said softly. "I won't push you. I promise." We sat there for a while, sipping our tea in silence. It wasn't the loud, uncomfortable silence I had become used to over the years. It was different, more peaceful. more open. By the time I left her house, the uneasy weight that had once defined our relationship seemed a little lighter. I wasn't naive enough to think everything was fixed in that one conversation, but it felt like we were on the path to something new, something healthier. As I drove home, I realized that this journey wasn't just about fixing things with my mom. It was about me taking control of my own life, standing up for myself, and breaking the cycle of manipulation. It was about me showing my child that they could stand tall, speak their truth, and never settle for anything less than respect. I wasn't the same person anymore, and that was the most powerful realization of all. The days that followed felt strangely calm, but I knew it was only the beginning. Rebuilding a relationship with my mother wasn't going to happen overnight, and I wasn't fooling myself into thinking we could just forget the years of pain, resentment, and emotional scars. But for the first time, I felt hopeful. I felt like I was taking control of my life, not just for myself, but for my child too. I wanted to show my baby that family could be a place of love, support, and respect, not manipulation and pain. As the weeks passed, I continued to keep my boundaries in place with my mom. I didn't give in to her old ways of trying to manipulate or guilt trip me. Instead, I stayed firm, and as much as it hurt, I knew I had to do this for my mental health. There were moments when she would slip, when she would try to make comments that made me question myself, but each time I called her out. And each time she seemed to get quieter, more reflective. I could see the change in her. She wasn't perfect, and I knew that. But she was trying, and that was more than I had ever expected from her. But there was still something missing, a part of me that wasn't quite ready to fully let her back in. I had been burned too many times, and I couldn't simply forget the years of emotional wounds that she had caused. She had been the one to tear me down, to make me feel unworthy, and I wasn't going to let her have that power over me anymore. Trust, I realized, was something that took time to rebuild. And even though I could see the effort she was making, there was still a part of me that wasn't ready to forgive her completely. Not yet. One evening, as I sat in my living room, a thought struck me. What if I never get that closure? What if, even after all these years, the relationship with my mother would always be strained, never quite whole? It was a scary thought, one that I had avoided for so long, but I had to face it. The truth was, I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to what we once were. I had spent so much of my life seeking her approval, chasing after something that wasn't there. Now that I had grown into myself, now that I was becoming a mother, I couldn't keep holding on to a version of her that didn't exist anymore. She had shown me who she was for so long, manipulative, controlling, and at times cruel. And while I wanted to believe that people could change, I couldn't ignore the scars she had left behind. But then I thought about my child. I thought about the kind of relationship I wanted to have with my baby, the kind of mother I wanted to be. Did I want to continue to hold on to this anger and resentment toward my own mother? Did I want my child to grow up with the same broken, complicated relationship I had with mine? I knew I didn't. I knew that if I wanted to be a better mother, I had to find a way to let go of the past, to accept that things would never be perfect, but that didn't mean they couldn't be better. A few days later, my mother reached out to me again, this time in a more vulnerable way. It wasn't a text or a call. She showed up at my door with a small, unassuming box in her hands. She didn't knock at first. Instead, she just stood there for a moment, as if waiting for me to open the door. And when I did, She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, genuine uncertainty, as if she was unsure of what to say. "I thought you might like this," she said softly, holding out the box. "It's a little something for the baby." I took the box from her, unsure of how to react. But when I opened it, I found a hand-knitted blanket, beautifully made, soft, and warm. It was the kind of thing that would have meant so much to me years ago, but now it felt like an olive branch. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was a gesture, an attempt to show me she was trying to be part of my life in a healthy way. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the moment sinking in. I had spent so long trying to get her to love me, to accept me for who I was. But now I realized something. I didn't need her to give me her approval anymore. I didn't need her to love me in the way I had always hoped. I needed to love myself, to accept myself, to give myself the love and validation I had always sought from her. And that's what I had been doing these past few weeks, learning to stand up for myself, learning to set boundaries, learning to be my own person. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "This means a lot to me." She didn't say anything at first, but I saw the way her eyes softened. She didn't try to defend herself, didn't try to justify her past behavior. She simply nodded. "I'm trying, Scarlett. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying." And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't have to forgive everything. I didn't have to forget the years of pain, but I could allow space for healing. I could let her try, and I could try too. Maybe we weren't going to be perfect, and maybe we would never have the kind of relationship I had once dreamed of. But we were on a new path, a path where I was learning to protect myself and my child, and where my mother was learning to respect that. It was a slow process, but it was a start. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held for our relationship, but for the first time, I felt hopeful. And sometimes that's all you need, to take the first step and let things unfold from there. As the days turned into weeks, I started to see small changes. My relationship with my mother was no longer defined by the constant push and pull of control and manipulation. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't without its bumps, but it felt like something new was beginning to take shape. A new dynamic, one built on respect, boundaries, and most importantly, honesty. For the first time in my life, I was allowing myself to be free from the weight of expectations that had always been placed on me, and I was learning to trust myself and my own instincts. The interactions with my mother were different. There were still moments when old habits threatened to resurface, when I felt her attempt to sway my decisions or undermine my choices. But each time I stood firm. I reminded myself that this was my life now. I had my own family to protect, my own child to care for, and I wasn't going to let anyone, even my mother, take that away from me. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room, I received a message from her. It was simple, but it meant more than I could ever explain. "I love you, Scarlett. I'm proud of you, and I'm so happy for the little one on the way." It wasn't the grand gesture I had always hoped for, but it was a step. It was the acknowledgement that she was starting to understand, that she was beginning to let go of the control she had clung to for so long. It was the beginning of something new, a new foundation built on mutual respect and understanding. I couldn't help but smile as I read the message. It wasn't a perfect relationship, and I knew it never would be. But we were learning. We were both learning how to be better. And for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe, like I could be me, unapologetically, without having to constantly seek her approval. As I looked down at my growing belly, I thought about the future, about the kind of mother I wanted to be for my child. I wanted to be the kind of mother who set an example of strength, who showed her child that boundaries were important, that standing up for yourself was necessary, and that love wasn't about control or manipulation. Love was about respect, support, and giving each other the space to grow. I thought about all the struggles I had been through, all the emotional wounds I had carried for so long, and I realized that I had made it through. I had made it through not because of anyone else, but because I had learned to fight for myself, to stand up for who I was, and to let go of the things that didn't serve me anymore. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. I knew there would be moments of doubt, moments when my past with my mother would come rushing back, reminding me of the pain I had endured. But I also knew that I had the power to create my own future, to shape my own path. And that was something no one could take away from me. I had learned a valuable lesson throughout all of this. It was okay to let go of the things that were holding me back. It was okay to release the weight of the past and to step into the future with a sense of freedom and peace. It wasn't about forgiving everything or forgetting the hurt. It was about choosing to move forward, choosing to be strong, and choosing to put my own well-being first. As I looked at my mother's message one last time, I realized something else. This wasn't just about her. It was about me, about how far I had come, about how much I had grown, and about how I was finally learning to love myself, not in spite of my flaws, but because of them. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. If you enjoyed this journey of strength, growth, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. You won't believe what happens next. Thank you for being part of this journey. And remember, no matter where you are in life, you have the power to take control, stand up for yourself, and build the future you deserve.